I'm Carey Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show Barney and Friends. Now my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Carey Stinson, and this is Purple Roads. Welcome to Purple Roads. This is going to be a fun show. We have Jessica D. Stone from Stanley. She was the voice actor for Stanley, which is Disney Channel, Disney Junior. But she's done a lot of other things, and we're going to talk about them all. Jessica, how are you?
I'm great, Carey. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Absolutely thrilled.
Well, this is going to be a lot of fun for people. This is one of those shows. You know, these shows bring up so much memories for people, and so
it brings up a lot of memories for me. That's for sure.
I'll bet it does, and I want to talk about all that. But I kind of want to start off with you. How did you get into, let's not just say voice acting, but into the entertainment business?
Well, you know, I did my first commercial at 6 weeks old. So I was,
wow.
Right. Yeah. So I was barely a person. I had nothing to do with it. Basically what happened was I have an older brother he's a carrot top redhead, and he was an absolutely adorable child, if I do say so myself. He was just very cute. And my mother had a friend who one day was like, I'm going to send my daughter's picture into some agents. You should send your son's. And my mom was like, okay, you know, because she was never like, you know, oh yeah, be in the industry. She was just like, whatever. So she did, and everybody wanted him. I mean, he did so much print when he was a kid. And so when I was born, you know, 4.5 years later, they were like, oh, a redhead, we'll take her too. So it was basically just a fluke. And then, you know, things started going from there. And I really started to shine when I got to the age where I had to do lines, because reading, you know, memorizing lines, I was really good at that. I could read at a really early age. And so basically, yeah, I just kind of got pushed into it. And then one day my brother was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I looked up at my mom and I said, I do, with a giant smile on my face. And it's just been that ever since. And then specifically voiceover wise, you know, that happened when I was, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. The voiceover agent at TGI, which is who I was with, and they don't exist anymore. At least their children's division doesn't. He was like, you know, she's got a great voice. It's really husky. It's different. We should put her in voiceover. And so the rest is history. So I really had nothing to do with it.
But did you enjoy, I mean, you obviously enjoyed it.
I love it. I loved it so much. I love it now. It's such a passion of mine. And I know that sounds super cliche, but it really is. I adored it. And it was never about, you know, oh, being popular or about being famous or about making money. Honestly, at that age, I couldn't have cared less about that. I still wouldn't care less about that if I, you know, didn't have to make a living. But
Sure.
At that age, you know, I used to say things like, I do this for free, or, you know, but no, I just absolutely adored it. It was just about the acting. I got along really well with adults. I loved it so much. It was everything to me.
Well, it sounds like it still is.
Oh, it really is.
We have had lots of different guests that from voice actors to actors. Some are specific and some, like you, do a little bit of everything. Do you have a preference? Is it voice acting? Is it on screen? Is it theater? Is it live?
You know,
I love it all.
I really love it all. I really do. I think, you know, I love everything for different reasons. One of the things that, you know, I love voiceover, but one of the things that I find, you know, a little, you know, that's not as much fun about it is you don't quite get the same social, you know, experience, because you don't really work with your castmates for the most part. You know, you do it alone in a voice booth, because otherwise they get, you know, feedback and echoes from having 2 microphones in there, which I did do a couple of times with Charles Shaughnessy during Stanley, but for the most part, it was just me. And so I mean, I got to know the engineers really well and all that stuff, but you don't get that same, camaraderie kind of feeling. So that I did miss, but and it's one of the things I love about acting, but it's really for me just about the acting itself. That's the part I love so much. So it really is, I love it all, but I have like favorite parts about each different one. So
Sure. It's interesting because on Barney and Friends, we actually did record. The voices were in the other room.
wow.
So they were recording. Now they were all in different booths and they were watching monitors so they could see what we were doing. So there was some separation, but it is really interesting that you see different ways that it was done.
Mm-hmm.
Is it difficult for you to just be doing that, basically just you? Is it a focus that you really get into?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I really, just really kind of get into it and you're doing it. And I feel like you don't quite get the same reaction wise, I mean, when you're acting with a person, they say something and you're reacting to what they're saying. So you're kind of having to make up that reaction.
Right.
But it's really, I think, just a skill that develops.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not quite as much fun, I don't think, but it definitely probably goes faster because you can do the whole, 3 takes and they pick one and then 3 takes and they pick one and 3 takes
Right.
and then they pick one and so on and so forth. So yeah, but I have done recording all together. It was a really long time ago. I think one of the first projects I ever did as a kid, and it was called Room to Grow for Sue Blue. I don't even know if you know who that is.
I don't.
No, she was pretty big in the industry at the time, but they did a short, and I played a flower called Woad. So there you go. It was a little boy. They started out with little boys. So yeah, we were all in little separate booths, but we were all together. So we were all speaking, with each other.
And when did you do your first on camera? How old were you?
6 weeks.
No, okay, I'm sorry, like a TV show.
Oh, I think that was 1995. So I was 5 years old. Now you all know when I was born and
Right.
how old I am now, which is totally cool. I don't mind. So I was 5. I think I was 5. It was the year I got my SAG card.
Wow.
And I think it was the job I got my SAG card for. It was the Knots Landing miniseries reunion, Back to the Cul-de-sac. I don't even know if you remember that show. I certainly didn't watch it. No, it was a pretty big series, and it had ended, and they did a miniseries reunion, and I played a baby that had been born at the end of the series as a little girl. But I was playing like a 3-year-old at 5 years old because that's kind of what I did. So.
Well, and you see that a lot. We obviously,
Yeah.
On Barney, we did a lot of that where we had kids that were older but looked younger. So
yeah.
that's definitely something that's done a lot. So at some point, Stanley comes around.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Did you have any idea what you were auditioning for? Did you have any idea
I had
how important this show was going to be?
No, none whatsoever. I was 10. Yeah, I was 10 years old.
Wow.
And I just got called in because I did all my voiceover, all your voiceover, most of them anyway, are done at the agency. Not anymore. These days, you record them at home and you send them in. But
Sure.
Back then, most of them were done at the agency. And so I just got called in for this audition, and I think I got 1 page of lines. And at the top of the page was this drawing of this kid with a giant head,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a snail on top of it. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but okay. So it was kind of, I think it was the old animation, because the original animation comes from England. Griff was his name, which is Stanley's last name. It was a series of books, and it got adapted into a TV show.
Right.
So it was the old animation. So I went in and I did the audition, and they sent it in on a tape, because that's how long ago this was. They sent it in on a tape. It wasn't digitally sent. It was people received a bunch of tapes, and 6 months went by, and
Wow.
I figured I didn't get it. I was moved past. I was 10 years old. I was moved on by that point. And my mother was picking me up from school, and I had just gone out for this movie, and I don't even remember what the movie was. But my mom got a call from my agent, and she's talking, and it sounds like really good news. And I'm thinking, I got the movie. I did it. I got the movie. I got this movie. My mom hangs up the phone and she says, Jessica, guess what? You got Stanley. And I look at her and I go, who's Stanley? Because I didn't remember. I had no idea what she was talking about. It had been 6 months. She goes, you know that cartoon, you know, the little boy, the one who loves animals. And I said, you mean the one with the snail on his head? And it was crazy because I had no idea it was going to be such a huge part of my life, because it is. I mean, even now it's such a huge part of my life, and it's such a huge part of my memories, and I hold so many warm memories about Stanley, and it's just crazy that that's how it started. That I had no idea what was going on, but you know, after I got a reminder and I was like, oh my gosh, I got it. You know, I get to be a cartoon character. This is so cool. You know, when you're 10 years old, being a cartoon character is a pretty big deal. So,
yeah.
Right, it's still a big deal, but especially when you're 10.
Right.
Right. So yeah, then I went in and recorded the pilot and waited on, you know, bated breath. Are they going to pick it up or are they not? And they did, and it was just a whirlwind of amazingness, really.
So I'm really curious about this, because at 10 years old, are you taking a lot of direction with this? Do you get it? Do they have to, I'm curious if it's, how much you have to be at 10 years old.
Yeah,
on this. I'm saying this because we just had Mary Gibbs on, who was Boo in Monsters, Inc.
Right, and she was
2.5 years old.
Right, very young.
And then we've had full adults, obviously, that have played little kids. So I think it's really interesting because you were right in the middle of this. I guess you probably understood some aspects of it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be honest, my memories from back then are a little spotty, you know.
Sure. Oh, sure.
But as far as direction wise, I mean, first of all, just so you know, that was my voice. You know, that was not a put on. That was how I sounded at 10 years old. I sounded like a 6-year-old boy, which is very flattering, but it turned out to be great.
Right, I was going to say, I bet you didn't care.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. It wasn't until they played it back I was like, I do sound like a little kid. I sound like a little boy. Like, that's weird, but I was, you know, thrilled. I mean, look what it got me.
Sure.
And as far as direction wise, I don't remember there ever being a huge amount of direction. I mean,
because it was your voice, right? You weren't having to adjust anything there.
Right. And when you're a kid, you know, one of the things that casting directors love about kids is that they just are. They're just being. You know, they're not acting. They're not putting anything on. They're not analyzing everything. And this is why I'm saying this, and this is what I'm feeling. They're just being kids. They're just doing. So, you know, and I think I've been doing this quite a while, at least acting, you know, quite a while. And so I pretty much knew, you know, I mean, this was my first real big voiceover job, but I don't think there was a huge amount of direction in the beginning. I mean, you know, besides the, you know, the basic stuff,
sure,
you know, for the most part, they just let me roll with it. You know, it was the whole, you know, they do the 3 takes at a time, and then they pick one, or they do 3 more depending on what they wanted. And Kent Meredith was amazing. He was my director through the whole, although I've been told that, and I don't remember this, to be honest with you, I've been told that Jim Jenkins actually directed the first episode, and that may be very true. Jim Jenkins is the creature. Yes. As I'm sure you know, obviously, you know, Doug and all the other stuff he's created. Yes. But I've been told, but I'll be honest with you, my memory, you know, I don't remember that exactly, but I'm sure if he says he did, he did. But, you know, for the most part, it was just, they was, you know, if they wanted something specific, they would tell me, but for the most part, they would just let me do, you know, whatever I instinctively did.
And were you following, were the drawings already done?
No, the drawings were done afterwards.
So afterwards.
I mean, they had the basic, you know, idea of what the characters look like, but the drawings were all done afterwards. And then there was some ADR done, but not a huge amount.
Well, I'm curious. You know, I worked with a lot of kids over the years, and sometimes they do what they do. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's the best thing about it, as you're kind of saying, is that they sometimes go in a different direction or whatever that may be. Do you remember if you had, were you given any visual whatsoever, or was it just a script basically?
I mean, I had a storyboard, the very basic of this is kind of what's happening and what's going on here. But for the most part, it was, I knew what was happening in the script. And if it was really complicated, they'd, sit there and explain it to me. And I had the storyboard, but it wasn't a huge amount on my radar. It was basically just, it was more like, I mean, I know I was sitting in a chair recording, but it was, I'm doing this right now. So I'm going to do it how I would do it. And yeah, no, it was just so great. I'm sorry. It was amazing.
No, we get that reaction a lot for us that have been in this very special industry, where you're dealing with such a special audience. Kids, whether it's a kid actor or just a kid, they are so authentic and they're so true, and whether they like it or not like it. There is no faking it like that.
Right.
What was it like for you when the first series came out and you actually got to see what you had done?
The first season?
The first season, yeah.
It was
first season.
No worries. It was, I can't even tell you. I mean, there was all this. I have a scrapbook, and actually I have a shrine, a Stanley shrine, courtesy of my mother. There was stuff everywhere. Just seeing, I'll be honest with you. At that age, I hated watching myself. I hated it. My parents would watch something with me. I would hide behind the couch because I don't know. I couldn't watch myself. But this was different because I could only hear myself. I didn't have to watch myself. Mm-hmm. So it was just, it was just crazy just seeing, all this stuff and watching, this cartoon that had been made and hearing myself behind it. But it would get so caught up in, sometimes it's like, oh, I would just hear me. But sometimes it was like, I don't, I get so caught up in it that I would only hear Stanley. And I'll be honest, I watched every episode.
which is awesome. Because it sounds like you watched it because you liked it, not just because you were watching yourself.
Yeah, no, I did. I liked it a lot. I really did. I thought, at that age, I was still young enough to remember a lot of shows when you're really young where they kind of talk down to you, where they look directly at you and they ask you questions with really big eyes. And then, and I was like, I don't want to be talked down to. And so Stanley was just like a show, but it was just a show for younger kids. But it wasn't, they taught you stuff, but they taught you things through stories. It wasn't like they were outright trying to like shove information in your face, which was one of the things I always really loved about it. And one of the compliments I always got most from parents about, oh my gosh, it's the only show that I like to watch that my kids like, that my kids like to watch, that I like to watch with them. So, again, my memory from back then is spotty, but really, it was just cool.
Well, that's an interesting, because I did it. Barney, you didn't see much of that. There wasn't a lot of parents that were. It was really meant for the kids only.
Right.
So there is something really special when you can do that, and there are some shows that have done very well that can kind of hit both, and I think that really helps when the parents, really enjoy the show that the kids are watching.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
My favorite Barney tape ever was Barney in concert. Did you do Barney in concert?
Was that the first one?
I don't know.
Do you know if it was in Dallas?
I have no idea where it was, but I loved the music so much I would watch it over and over and over and over and over.
So funny. My first video with them was in 1994, so I'm going to really age myself. Radio City Music. It was Barney in concert live, so it was at Radio City Music Hall. So that was my first one, and then I did Barney's Big Surprise and Barney's Magical Castle, So that was all the live stuff that I did. And then I did the TV show, Barney and Friends, for 12 years.
Which is amazing.
Well, it's why I see that. It was why I wanted to do this show, and it's why I see this smile on your face, because, I feel the same way. This opportunity. It's interesting though, because I was older. Obviously, I was 23 when I started, and so it's interesting you coming in at 10. When did you have like a friend or someone say they loved the show? When was the first time that you got feedback?
To be honest about, like, it wasn't really about feedback from friends, because most of my friends at that age were like, I'm too old to watch Stanley. But they all thought, right, I'm
Yeah.
10. I'm too cool for that.
Sure, sure.
10 years old. I'm
Yeah.
double digits now. But
Right.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's too cool for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they all thought it was so cool that I was the voice of a cartoon character. That they did love. They, in fact, it was funny because for years I would go back and visit my elementary school and help out one of my old teachers, and I'd have people going, "Hey, that's Stanley! That's Stanley!" And I'm like, "How do these people even know this stuff? Like, is people going around like talking about me or something?" But I don't really remember like first feedback, but I just one of the things that always has stuck out in my mind is my 6-year-old cousin.
Okay.
He loved Stanley. Stanley was the coolest. He thought Stanley was amazing. And I remember my aunt trying to explain to him that I was the voice of Stanley, and his words were, "No, because Stanley's a boy, because Jesse's a girl and Stanley's a boy." And she tried to convince him, and eventually she did convince him as he got a little older. He was probably 5 at that time, but by the time he was 6, he said, my aunt passes on to me, he said, I get to say hi to my cousin Jesse every morning when I watch Stanley, which was just amazing. And then he had to have a Stanley birthday party, and so I had to go online to the Disney website and because one of the things you could do with Stanley on the Disney website was you could pull, like, you could take a background and like put different characters in it and animals and stuff. And so I went on and made all of these, and then I signed them all, like they're coloring pages, and I signed them all and mailed them to him to give out to his friends at his birthday, and they just thought it was the most amazing thing. Most of them didn't get it. I don't know what Stanley. I don't know. Stanley is Stanley. Stanley's a real person. But he was just so proud, and that's one of the things that has always stuck in my mind as just incredible. So yeah.
Well, and what was it like? We haven't talked about this part, but you're also on Disney. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yes.
To have your show on Disney. What was that like for you?
I have to be honest with you.
Sure.
I have always been a very humble actor, and I like to pretend with my friends. I pretend to be very, I'm so great and all that stuff. But the truth is, when people talk about my acting, I'm always like, oh, okay, so for the most part, I've gotten better at it, but it was always really exciting for me. I not only am I a cartoon character and I'm on TV, but I am on one of the most watched channels anywhere when it comes to kids. So it wasn't just something, because most of the stuff I'd done before that, and most of the stuff I did around that time was all stuff like Chicago Hope, Star Trek Enterprise, that kind of stuff that my friends didn't watch. 6 Feet Under. None of my friends didn't watch any of that stuff, obviously. Nobody, well, there was that one girl, but we'll get back to that. But your parents let you watch 6 Feet Under? That's a little weird. Okay. But no, so most, they wasn't on their radar. They wanted to, well, what have you been doing? And I would tell them, and it was just like blank faces. But I finally had something that they would know about, that they had heard of, that I had a lot of friends whose younger siblings watched the show. I had a friend whose 14-year-old I had another friend when we were 14 whose favorite show was Stanley, of all things. And it was just, you know, it was a different experience from anything that I had ever done before, because I was finally on the radar of people my own age. And it was really cool. It was also really different and interesting because I got a lot more attention. And, you know, the attention sometimes was, you know, it wasn't bad attention, but it wasn't always like, you know, I kind of want to just be me and be at school and do my stuff, you know, and not necessarily want to talk about that stuff right now.
Right.
So, right. But yeah.
When did you, how long did it take for them to tell you that you were going to do a second season, or did you know when the first one was going, or did they go let it get out there to see what reaction?
Okay, so here's something that I did not know that Bob actually told me. DJ Bob actually told me, because he in fact knows a lot of things about Stanley that I don't know. But
yes, and we're big fans here. Purple Rose, DJ Bob, we love it. We absolutely love him, and do check out his show.
Yes, please do. Definitely go check out DJ Bob's show, because he is amazing.
He is.
But one of the things he told me, because one of the things you have to remember is the first season of Stanley, it came out right around, so right near the end of it was when 9/11 happened. And that was everywhere, and obviously. And so apparently the people who were responsible for picking it up again and doing all that stuff they forgot about it, which is totally understandable, so much that they almost completely forgot to notify us that Stanley had been picked up for a second season. So I think there was a much, like, I can't remember exactly, there was a lot going on at that time, but I think we were waiting for longer than we were supposed to. But, you know, and I feel like, you know, it was exciting, but there was also, you know, there was so much other stuff going on, and so much sad stuff going on, that I feel like, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was kind of like a mixed feeling. Like it was a happy thing for me. It was great, but, you know, there were other things that were being focused on at the time. So, and I do know that Disney Channel didn't focus on obviously any of that. They didn't talk about it at all. And so I know that they started showing Stanley and all the other shows a lot, like all the time, just to keep the kids busy and occupied. But no, being picked up for a second season, and then it just is, I mean, anytime you're waiting, you're like, okay, I got picked up for one season, now what's going to happen? And I'm sitting around and I'm waiting, and I have no idea what's going on. And then I got picked up again, and I can't tell you exactly what happened at the time, because it's not exactly, I don't exactly remember it. But mostly in my mind, Stanley is one big, like, big mosh of memories that are, who knows when they happened, and they're one big thing in my memory. And then there are some little things, some specific memories that stick out, but for the most part, it's like one big thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting you're saying that, because lots of things. One, we were filming as well during 9/11, and so I know that was an emotional time. We felt almost like it was our job to bring happiness, and, you know, I don't know, just put a focus around us, because we were in the middle of production when that happened, and not that we still didn't have fun, but there was definitely a much more focused group during that time. So I know what you're saying there, but I'm interested, because as you were talking about getting picked up and all that, how old were you at this point? Let's say the second season. So,
well, let's see. We started the very.
I mean, you don't have to give me the exact time, but probably what, 13, 14?
By the second season, no, I wasn't that old.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It was probably around 12.
Okay, so did you understand, like, when you're, you know, let's say your mid-20s, and you're waiting for something, like, it's a big deal, because, you know, you got to pay bills and things, you know, right. But when you're 12, you were probably so thrilled with doing the first, not that you didn't want to do the next season, but there's probably a different mentality there. I'm really curious about that.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff going on. Like we talked about 9/11, but there was also,
Sure.
you know, there's also school and all the things that a kid is focused on that, you know, you kind of, in one of the things that, you know, is so great about being a kid is that you're very in the present.
Yeah.
So, you know, whatever it is you're doing right at that moment, that's what has your focus.
Right.
So it wasn't, you know, I'm sure the adults were all sitting around going, okay, what's going to happen?
Right.
Um, but us kids, you know, including me, were more like, okay, I'm going back to school and I'm doing my thing and I'm playing with my friends and blah blah blah. And oh, Stanley got picked up for a second season. Oh, that's really really great. I'm excited. You know,
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think it was more of that mentality of the, you know, just, you know, it was exciting, but it wasn't foremost on my mind.
And did you know the other castmates? Did you meet them? Did you ever work together with them?
I did. Like I said, I worked with Charles Shaughnessy like about, I think about 3 episodes, maybe
Okay.
3 times actually recording with him. But I met him several other times. I met, gosh, I can't even remember her name, the little girl who played Mimi and Marcy. But mostly that was just in passing, like when I would be leaving and she would be coming in, because I would do mine the whole day, but she would only come in after school. So, you know, most of the people I met in passing, you know, me leaving and them coming in, or them leaving and me coming in, that kind of thing. Um, but I think of everybody, I probably got to know Charles the best. And then, but you know, I remember Sean Pyfrom and Renee Mujisha and of course Hynden Walsh, you know, um, who does a lot of other stuff. And then um, you know, who I don't think I met, or I may have met maybe one time, I barely remember, is Ari, the who was the one who played the mother. I can't remember her name. I'll be honest with you. I know that sounds really bad,
Well,
but
no, you were 12 years old. No, that's
right.
very understandable.
And then there was, I think I met um only one of our kids was played by an adult, and that was Lester. And that was, I think I met her once. I met John Ritter at the very end. I met him. I went in to record after him, or he came in to record after me when he worked on um, the Stanley's Dinosaur Roundup.
Hmm.
He signed my script, and that was really amazing because that was right around that time, but right before he died. But um,
Which
no,
had to have been very. How old were you at that point?
oh, by that point I was probably 13, probably a year later, year
Did you
after
know
that.
who John Ritter was?
Yes, I did
Oh, okay.
know who John Ritter was. My mother, I'd seen it by that point,
Oh, okay.
or at least I'd seen the first half of it by that point. I don't think I was able to make it through the rest of it at that point. I was like, I can't watch this. Um, and then I think, wasn't he in Dreamer of Oz? I think he was. I would
Not
have to
sure.
look that up. My mother loved that movie, so I believe he was in that too. Yes, so I did know who John Ritter was, and yes, so that was quite an experience. And then, you know, to find out, I think it was a couple weeks later that he passed away, was really hard. But yeah, so for the most part, and then, oh, and then the little girl who played Lester's little sister in a couple of episodes, I actually grew up with her and her sister. I met them when I was 5 years old at auditions,
Yeah.
and her older sister was my best friend. So I already knew them. And then I had a cast party at my house at the end
Oh.
of the show. Not everybody came. In fact, a lot of people didn't. But I lived kind of out. I lived kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So, but I know Sean came and Megan came, and I think the person I got to know the best was my engineer Paul McGrath and my teacher Pam. So
And I was curious about that. So you were doing obviously school at the set or at the wherever you were recording, and then you would go back to school when the season was on a hiatus, I guess is the what you say.
I worked. So originally they had me coming in a couple days after school. And then my mom was finally like, you know, I think it might make more sense for her to just come in and do, you know, on what, just one day. I only worked on Wednesdays. I worked on Wednesdays. I spent every other day at school. I would do one episode every Wednesday. I was there for, I don't remember, however long you're allowed to work, 9 hours, you know, because 3 of those were school. And I would record an episode. I would record like the story, because it was 2 stories. I would record one story, and then I would have lunch and school, and then I would record the other story. So I would get 1 episode done a day. And yeah, I was doing school there. It was at LA Studios. We recorded at LA Studios, which is down near Universal, below Universal Studios. Mm-hmm. And it was, there's a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, they recorded a lot of stuff. I met a lot of people there. A lot of stories about that. But yeah, so LA Studios, and mostly, no, I spent most of my time at regular school. Yeah.
That's interesting. Did what was it when this whole thing was done? I'm curious about it. Was it tough for it to end?
Yeah.
For you?
It was really hard. It was really hard. I you know, I mean, I know when we ended the 2nd season, I already knew I was coming back for a 3rd one. And I was a little older at that point. And so, you know, it was, you know, I was like, okay, I'm coming back. So it's okay, I'm coming back. But after the 3rd season ended, it was really difficult to know that I would never be going there. I wouldn't be going there every Wednesday. I wouldn't be seeing, you know, all the people I loved every Wednesday.
Right.
I wouldn't be getting to record and talking to Kent every Wednesday. It was really difficult and sad. And I mean, obviously I got used to it, but I miss it every day. So.
Well, we talked about that a lot, because with our show, same thing happened. Now ours, a lot of times because they were on camera, they would just get too old, and it's the worst thing in the world to have to tell a kid that, you know, you're basically just losing that. You're moving on because you've grown, which obviously you have no control of that. What did you do after Stanley?
See, right after Stanley. So 13, around 15, that's when the acting age started to get difficult, because you're making that transition.
Sure.
And I always looked really young. I think the very next thing I did after Stanley, because during Stanley, like I said, I was working on, right before Stanley, I did Chicago Hope. And during Stanley, I was working on 6 Feet Under and Star Trek Enterprise. And then after Stanley, I don't think I did anything for a little bit. But then I went on and did United States of Tara, and not like, obviously not a regular, but I was on that, and I did. And then also during all that time, I was also doing a lot of Japanese anime dubbing. So I was probably working on some of that stuff at the time, but I can't remember which exactly.
So I guess where I was going is, did it take you, was there a transition period for you to leave something that you've been doing for so long and get your head into moving into something else?
Oh, totally. You know, it was like, okay, now I have to go back to, I mean, obviously there were auditions all the time, but now I have to go back to not necessarily being a working actor. I have to go back to auditioning, and, you know, and I don't have that to look forward to. I can't, you know, it's over.
Right.
And it was still on, which was helpful, that it was still on and not everything had come out yet. But for me, it was such a big part of my life that it just came to a halt. And yeah, it was a really hard transition to going back to, you know, just for a while at least being kind of a normal person again.
Yeah, that term, normal person.
Yeah, not that I wasn't normal before
that.
No,
you know, I understand it. A purple dinosaur for 22 years. I understand exactly what you're talking about. Before we go further, because I do want to talk about the next stage, but I'm curious on the process because this is so interesting. It's a very different process than I worked on.
Mhm.
When you were doing this, were there rehearsal? Were you getting playback, or were you just reading lines basically?
There was no rehearsal.
Okay.
Sometimes there was playback, but it really depended on what had been recorded already, and it was only if it felt like it was really needed, like I really
Mhm.
needed to get that reaction. For the most part, it was just me reading lines, and I got to be so familiar with Stanley. I mean, I was Stanley. It got to be
Sure.
like became kind of one person that I got to that point where I would read lines and I would say, you know what? Stanley doesn't talk like this. This isn't what Stanley would say. And they'd be like, okay, well, what would he say? And I'd say he'd say this, and they would say, okay, well, let's try that instead.
Wow.
Because I just knew Stanley so much, that there was, I knew how he spoke. I knew the way he said things, and if it looked, and it wasn't very often that it
Right.
would look, I mean, we had really good writers,
Sure.
but
Sure.
every so
Sure.
often we get something. I mean, they're adults, they're writing for kids, they don't necessarily know how kids speak, and I
Right.
was a kid, and
Right.
so I did know how kids speak, and so occasionally it would be like, no, that doesn't seem right, it's just, and especially as Stanley, Stanley doesn't, that's not what he would say. He would say
Sure.
it like this. And for the most part, they took my advice. And so if some of the lines that are in the show are just a tiny bit rewritten by me. But obviously I give the writers all the credit because they are.
Oh, sure. But I think that's fascinating too, because they would, like, you might get with some actors, you might get that kind of thing as they're older. It's almost an ego thing, right? But for a 13-year-old, you just know the character. Like, there's such purity in that, and just I presume you just took so much pride and so much, love for what you were doing that, hearing you say that, I could see their point too, going, oh, okay, absolutely, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, no, it was never about like I want to write the line, like you
Right.
said. It was about I want this, kid, because I know kids, and kids recognize when things that are not right.
They
Like
do.
kids are gonna watch that and go, huh, that didn't, so it was just mostly just I want to put the best thing out there. And then
Mhm.
on top of that, it can be difficult to act something that doesn't feel natural,
Right.
so just very occasionally it would just be something that just was like, no, I think it could be better said this way. But yeah, no, it was just purely out of knowing Stanley.
No, I love that. I love it because I can see that. And when you have a production like that everyone gets, why you have success,
Mhm.
right? That no one gets upset that a 13-year-old has changed your words, because you're like, oh, I totally get it. I love that. I love that. I want to talk about, you were just talking a little bit about Japanese anime, and we've had several performers on that here. That's a completely different, wouldn't you say? I'm seeing the head nod. Uh,
Dubbing is, oh, go ahead.
Challenging, to say the least.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear what that's been like for you.
Well, I started doing dubbing around 12, so pretty much right
Wow.
after I did Stanley. And I found, and this is after I also did a lot of looping as a kid. I was in a loop group, so I did a lot of looping for.
And explain what that is.
Okay, so looping is basically, obviously, Do you know what that is? You do. Okay. So for the rest of you, looping is so basically when you watch a movie and you hear the main people talk, but you're hearing all those background noises, they can't have those people be doing that stuff and saying those things when they're recording the movie because it interferes with the leads, lines. So what they do is at the end, they bring in what's called a loop group, which is a group of people who come into a big recording studio and basically record in all that background noise, whether it's cheering or singing or just conversations or talking, and then they just adjust it so that it sounds like background noise
Hmm.
or whatever it's supposed to be. So, yeah.
So, so you've done that, and then into the Japanese.
So yeah, then into the dubbing. So I found that I was just naturally very good at matching lip flaps. Dubbing was something I just naturally
And would
did.
that have come from all the voiceover work you'd already done, do you think?
I mean, it's definitely possible.
Or just the fact that you started at, at 6 months old, you got to be so comfortable at that point.
Yeah, no, I really am. And I think honestly, the older I get, the more I stress about the matching the flaps and that kind of thing. Because like when you're a kid, you're like, I don't care. I'm just gonna do what I do. And when you're an adult,
Sure.
you're like, okay, gotta do a good job. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
well, there's pressures, but I love that you're mentioning that, because as an adult, now you can have both, right? You can have your heart in it, but it is a job too. You have to pay bills. You're building a career. You're doing all of those things. So that's probably what you're talking about, right? That
yeah,
that pressure comes in.
that and just as the older you get, as after you pass those teenage years, you become more self-conscious and self-aware of what you're doing, and you start to care more about what people think, and and I need to get this, because when I was a kid, I was just very naturally fast at dubbing, and I'm still pretty fast at it, but I think the working towards it and the caring and the worrying about it actually does the opposite, has the opposite effect. It makes it a little bit harder. But yeah, no, definitely there's all those all those responsibilities you have and all those worries, and like I got to do a good job because I gotta I need to be able to come back. I want them to hire me again and that kind of thing, and
Right.
like I got to pay those bills, and because also just because I want to be here and all that stuff. So yeah, there's definitely that, but dubbing was just something that I naturally, I don't know, I naturally took to. I think, obviously when you're 12, it's much easier to pick things up the younger you are and to learn them quickly. And so I started out, obviously mostly, and I worked with one particular director. Basically everything I did was with him. And I started out with a little boy and something called Hibernate Red May, which is Angel Tales. And just went from there and moved on. And that's how I learned a British accent, was working on Japanese anime dubbing. And then I think my most like held close to my heart role is being the voice of Makoto in Street Fighter, because being a character in Street Fighter is like, wow. I mean, that game has been around. I used to play that on the Super Nintendo. So that is,
I did too.
yeah. So that was a really cool experience. And then going to a release party of it was just, just really, really amazing, to be able to say, yeah, I'm part of Street Fighter, because people know what that is. They do.
But what if they find out that you're also Stanley?
Oh, I actually saw a tweet a little while ago from somebody who said, I just realized that these were the same people. And there was one picture was of Stanley and the other one was of Makoto. And I was like, that's hilarious, because you would never guess. I mean, you'd never put them together unless you know me and you know my voice. And then you'd be like, yeah, I can see that those being the same people. But yeah, and I find that, I don't know, I don't always find that the people run in the same circles. Although it is funny when, because some of the people who love Street Fighter, as a kid, they watch Stanley. And so, yeah, when they find out that it's the same person, they think it's pretty cool and they think it's pretty wild. They're pretty surprised. Yeah.
Did you have much adjustment, as we're talking about voice acting, as your voice got older? And there was change. Did you have to adapt in any way, or you sound different? Does that change things for you?
The only thing my voice has really done is gotten a little bit deeper or lower. For the most part, I mean, I can still basically hit Stanley, like at least in a good time. If I'm a horse, I have more problem with it, but
right.
I can't quite get to that register, but I can get pretty darn close. And I mean, I'm still playing, doing a lot of stuff I audition for is little boys, and I still, and I think I still gravitate towards that. My voice is definitely younger it's definitely on the younger side. And, you know, sometimes I'll listen back to myself and go, oh my gosh, do I really sound like that still? I sing with a group of, if I sing with a group of people, you can pick me out right away. You're like, yep, that's Jessica. That's that little kid voice over there. But as far as adjusting, I think the biggest adjustment is is auditioning for adult women, because that is not, at least not to me, what I feel like I sound like. You know, I still feel like a kid, but I also still hear myself as a kid, and I sound different to me than everybody else hears. So when I'm like, okay, that sounds like an adult, and then I'll play it back and be like, that does not sound like an adult. That sounds like, you know, my voice is very, you know, like it could be, you can listen to it and depending on what I'm doing with it, it could be anywhere from like 16 to 25, you know, depending on what they're looking for. So I think the biggest adjustment is having to do more adult women, really, and auditioning for that, because that's, you know, it's something I feel like, you know, I feel like it should be a natural thing because I am an adult woman,
Sure.
but I don't feel like I naturally, because especially when I get really excited, my register goes up and I get higher, and then I start to sound even younger. So it's something I have to fight, because if I get, like, 'cause I'm supposed to be excited, but if I get too excited, if I go too much in that direction, I just start to sound like a little kid. So that's, I think, has been the biggest adjustment.
That's it. That's fascinating. BJ, the yellow dinosaur on Barney Friends, was a female, female actress, voice actor as well. So you see that a lot, which I think surprises people. How many women actually play boys?
Except on Disney.
Really?
Disney likes to cast kids as kids, girls as girls, and boys as boys, right? Because partly, a lot of it, and it makes total sense. Right around the time I was doing Stanley, I went and auditioned for Dash in The Incredibles.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like a big audition. Like I went and sat in an office and sat in front of like some big wig dude, because I was on their radar at the time. And ultimately they told me, they said, you know, we really love you, you're great, your voice is great, but we want to cast a boy. And the reason that they want to do that is because if you look at all the PR they did with that movie and all the PR they did with the actors,
yes,
they've got all these little kids looking up to them. Right. You know, oh, Dash is so cool, he's, oh my gosh, I want to be like him, and blah blah blah, only to find out that it's an adult woman playing him. That's right. That's a little, I mean, what do you do with that? Like, how does a kid continue to look up to that when they're like, right? So they can't do nearly as much PR, and they like doing all that PR. I mean, it's Disney. Sure. I know that when I went in and when we did the PR for the opening of Playhouse Disney Live, if you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
It was supposed to be this huge thing with the Wiggles and all these people, and then 9/11 happened and they toned it down immensely. But Charles Shaughnessy and I went and stayed in the new California Adventure Hotel, and we did these radio interviews in California Adventure, like right outside the Playhouse Disney Live. And we, but all our radio interviews were as the characters, not as ourselves, because I'm a little girl, right, like a 6-year-old boy, and they didn't want to, you know, which, you know, is totally understandable to me, because again, if I were, you know, a 6-year-old boy and I was like, oh my gosh, Stanley's so cool, and then especially at that age, you don't even want to they don't even understand the whole concept of somebody else is playing this, you know. This is Stanley. Stanley is Stanley. He's real.
Well, your cousin didn't understand it.
No, he didn't. No, he really didn't. He was like, nuh-uh. Like it was almost like he was looking at us with like pity, like it's sad that you think that, but no.
So what are you doing these days, and what's in the future?
You know, I'm actually I'm actually working on 2 Japanese anime projects right now. I wish I could tell you about them, but they haven't been announced yet, so I'm not allowed to. That's okay.
We will send people to follow you, and when you're ready to announce, you can announce it. Everyone will find out about it.
Yes, so I'm super excited about that. I'm actually recording in a studio.
And how is that going with what's going on with COVID?
You know, there's only 3 of us in the whole place. the director, the engineer, and me, and I spend the whole time mostly in the booth. And they do all this disinfecting, so I'm not worried.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure some people might be, but I'm not.
Sure.
I feel perfectly safe, and I've been there several times, and I'm fine.
Sure.
So, but it's just amazing to be back in the studio. It's been a hard, I mean, the industry is hard. You spend a lot more time looking for jobs than you do actually working. That's just the way it is. And so I mean, it's thrilling to be working on 2 projects at the same time. I'm actually going in tomorrow. So,
Awesome.
But yeah. And, I will tell you, I'm actually a girl in one of them, which is crazy because I have worked for him. I've worked for him, since I was 12, and this is the third girl I've ever played. So we'll see.
Is that, so you just have to change your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, for that, I'm actually just doing mostly my regular voice, but yeah, I just have to change my mindset. I mean, I have to work more at the boys because obviously that's, I have to, adjust, but yeah, it's strange because, a lot of Japanese anime, all the girls have those really high voices. Right. That is not me by any means. I am not that girl. I can try to be that girl, but I usually don't succeed, especially not for very long, because if I try to stay up at that register for too long, I tend to get a little hoarse. But yeah, so it's nice to be able to play a girl with my voice because, it's just.
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a girl. This is my voice.
Right.
It happens. It happens. I am living.
So what are your favorite moments of your times with Stanley?
My favorite moments as Stanley are mostly, okay, so I have to tell you, would you like to hear the Brad Pitt story?
Of course I would.
Okay, so the Brad Pitt story goes like this, and this is one of my favorite stories. I was working at LA Studios, and I met a lot of people there because, again, a lot of people would come in, and they have a very small parking lot. So after you park, you have to give them your keys so they can move things around to get people out and all kinds of stuff. So I had finished working one day. It was near the end of the day, and almost everybody was gone. And there were all these keys set out on the front desk. And I come out and I find out that Brad Pitt, so my mom tells me earlier, she goes, I saw Brad Pitt drive in. And I'm like, Brad Pitt's here? Because I'm 12 and Brad Pitt was really cute. And this is a big deal. She said, Brad Pitt's here. Brad Pitt's here? Oh my gosh, Brad Pitt's here. So I find out that Brad Pitt is through one of the doors in one of the studios. And I'm like, okay, we're going to stay here until Brad Pitt comes out, right? So that's the plan. My mom goes, okay, Jessica, it's time to go. And I said, Mom, Brad Pitt's in that room. We're going to stay. We're going to meet him. And she goes, no, we have to leave. And I said, no, okay, Mom, you're not getting it. Okay, let me explain it to you. I'm going to do it slowly. Brad Pitt is through that door. And she says, yes, we have to go. And I said, no. Okay, no, Mom, no. Brad Pitt. The Brad Pitt, Brad Pitt, the actor, the superstar Brad Pitt is right through there. She goes, I know, but we have to go. I said, no. I tried to explain it to her. She didn't get it. So I finally said, fine, we'll leave. And I walked over to the front and I said, excuse me, which keys are Brad Pitt's? And the lady said, those ones. And I said, okay. And then I stood there for a while and I waited till she looked away. And then I grabbed the keys in my hand and put them behind my back and started backing away. And I was like, because I'm going to go steal Brad Pitt's keys. Like, that's my plan. I'm going to steal his keys and then he can't leave. And then the next time I come back, he's still going to be here, right? That's the plan. And she says, Jessica. And I said, yes. She says, give me the keys. I said, keys? I don't have any keys. I don't know what you're talking about. There are no keys here. She says, give me the keys. I said, fine. And I put them on the desk. And I was so sad. But I kissed his car. That's my Brad Pitt story. I also really loved meeting the voices of Mickey and Minnie Mouse.
Oh, I bet that was cool.
It was so cool. And it makes even more cool to find out that not only are they the voices of Mickey and Minnie Mouse, although I think he has passed away at this point, but they met and fell in love playing those voices and got married.
I did not know that.
Yes, right? It was like, it's perfect. It's just perfect. It was just perfect to find out. Yeah, no, I met, no, just different things, playing golf. There was a little tiny little golf thing in one of the studios upstairs, playing golf with my teacher, on a break. Just, you know, eating at all the different restaurants, just the PR, going to the PR and having like most of the day to just go around Disneyland and California Adventure with a personal guide and not having to wait in any lines.
Yeah, for a 12 or 13-year-old, that's got to be a dream.
It's amazing. I remember we were on a ride one time and she goes, "Do you want to go again?" And I said, "We can do that." She goes, "We're going again." And we just drove right through. And I was like, and all the kids are looking at us like, "Why don't they have to get off?" And I was like, yeah, it was really cool.
The perks of the industry.
Right? She pointed, I got to learn about all the different hidden Mickeys. You know what those are, the hidden Mickeys?
I don't.
Oh, there are hidden Mickeys all around Disneyland. One of them is like, and it's literally just 3 circles. So if you're one of my favorites is if you're in Pirates of the Caribbean, if you are, when you get to the part where the ship and the wall are shooting cannonballs at each other.
Yeah.
If you like when the lights go up, I think it's lightning. If you can look over at the holes in the wall, there's one with 2 small holes and one big hole below it. Yeah. And then there's if you look really closely on soaring over California, which I guess is now soaring over the world.
Yeah, they adjusted. Yeah, they made the change on that.
Right. As the golf ball goes by, I don't know if it's still there. If you look really closely, really quickly, there's a Mickey hat on the golf ball. So they're all over. Yeah.
Awesome.
So that was really cool. It was
Well, I can't thank you enough for being on today.
Oh, well, I can't thank you enough for inviting me to be on your show. I had an absolutely amazing time.
Well, I love hearing these stories. It's so cool to hear these different perspectives. I just think it's awesome, and I know all the fans of Stanley are going to be so excited.
It makes me happy because honestly, the best part, and this is going to sound cliche too, but the best part of Stanley has always been and still is when people tell me like stories about, you know, what it meant to them, or you know, just different things, or I'll find you know, people are still posting about it on Twitter and stuff, you know, like they want Stanley to come to Disney Plus. And in fact, I freaked a couple people out a little while back by responding to those tweets and being like, "I totally agree." And then they looked me up and were like, "Oh," I had one girl go, "Oh my God." And then I had one girl like retweet my tweet and be like, "Y'all, the voice of Stanley just liked this post." It was like, so yeah, no.
It's always the best part of this.
It really is.
Is interacting with the amazing fans.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I wish the same to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you, Carey. It's been wonderful.
I'm still smiling.
Me too.
Thank you so much for watching Purple Roads. Remember to keep your eyes, ears, and your heart open, and you'll find your purple road. We'll see you next week.